So what would a trade deal actually look like? And what is the best outcome for you, the investor? Let's talk about all that and bring back our friend Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, CEO of MCC Global Enterprises, and a CNBC contributor also here, Ed Mills, Washington policy analyst at Raymond James. I love it now, Michelle, because I can ask you to editorialize. Are you surprised the market is not reacting more positively to, I thought, was supposed to be a positive development?
Yeah, we got positive developments regarding trade today, and we also got very good inflation data as well. So you would expect perhaps we get an even bigger rally in the stock market. That would suggest a lot of it was priced in, that a lot of people were assuming, and a lot of investors were assuming that the worst was over in April when we saw that big decline. And like we talked about yesterday, the assumption was things will not get worse. They could get better. If they did get worse, the market was offsides. But I think the market's telling you today that a lot of this was priced in. And Howard Lutnick hammered that on the interview this morning on CNBC, saying, you know, Chinese tariffs are not going up from here. This is it. That gives a lot of certainty to manufacturers, importers, et cetera.
Ed, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so a lot of the questions we've gotten here at Raymond James is exactly what does the president mean when 55% remains? And what we've heard is that that's the 20% fentanyl plus the reciprocal plus the 232s. These are pretty high tariffs still. Going forward, are we ever going to get the details? Maybe, but not anytime soon. What I'm really focused on is what can happen next. And we have a G7 meeting that's occurring in Canada. Can we get a lot more good news? Can the market react to that going into the week next week as that starts on Sunday, Kelly?
Right. So that said, if you know, is the market basically just kind of buying the rumor, selling the fact here, Ed?
I think that the market wants more information. I think that there was a bit of a concern that the first reaction was we agreed to go back to what we agreed to previously, that if all we're getting out of this is what happened in Geneva, is that enough for the market, Kelly, or do we need more? We have a lot of questions at Raymond James about the new restrictions on chemicals, on jet engines, on the Huawei Ascend chip. What have those come off? I think that the Ascend chip is probably the question that I get the most from clients, and that's really important to the semiconductor space. Do we see that restriction stay on? Back in Trump 1.0, they always made sure there was a distinction between the national security lane and the economic lane. Right now, if you put a lot of these export controls into these negotiations, that is bringing those two together. That could be a huge problem for this administration on Capitol Hill, because again, going back to that first administration, when there were a couple of times when they veered into the national security lane for these negotiations, Congress came back and told Trump no, and they passed new legislation. Congress right now is considering legislation to go much harsher on tech export controls, especially on semiconductors.
Yeah.
The more he includes this, the greater the risk from Washington on that sector actually occurs.
And I find that fascinating. You just said that the question you get the most from people is whether they can have access to Huawei's Ascend chip. I mean, that's extraordinary. Just talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it really goes into the question as to how far we are going to restrict U.S. technology that is going into China and how much Chinese technology can be the base technology for a lot of the rest of the world. What we've seen from U.S. companies and those who use U.S. technology is a question on whether or not if we restrict it too much, are we cutting off our nose to spite the face? Are we giving an unintended consequence where China can start to rise? And so having the Huawei Ascend chip restricted globally was one of those ways to kind of cut off some of those restrictions, and is really a question on how aggressive this administration is going to get coming from here on semiconductor, on semi-cap equipment, on different EDA software that goes into China. The more we restrict that, the more this market is really concerned about what Trump does next.